Welcome everybody. Thank you for your interest in the No Nonsense Phonics programme. My name is Debbie Hepplewhite and I'm the author of the programme. And joining us today in this presentation is Carl Pattison, and he's going to be able to tell you all about himself and his work. So who am I and how did I get involved with writing phonics programmes? Well, basically, I am an ex-primary teacher and head teacher and special needs teacher. And you could call me a pioneer for promoting the need for research-informed systematic synthetic phonics provision in our schools. And then because of that interest in the field and working with children over many years, led to me designing actual resources. And once you start designing resources, you end up doing a full programme. So basically, that's who I am. And I'm going to hand you over to Carl Pattison now.
Hi, yes. Like Debbie, I'm a former primary teacher and head teacher, but more recently I've sort of specialised in literacy. So I'm lucky enough to be a literacy consultant, doing independent work, but also as an early reading lead for the Flying High Trust, which is a primary-based trust in the East Midlands with over 30 schools. So it's my job to support those schools with literacy and particularly early reading.
Right, thank you very much, Carl. Right, now, before we go any further, I want to talk about teamwork and hard work, because the body of resources that we're going to show you now has taken many, many years to develop, but it's actually involved 3 companies. So there's the company Phonics International Limited, which is the company that I'm part of. Then we've got Raintree Publishers, who have actually published the No Nonsense Phonics skills material. And then we've got Wand Education, and they have done a body of work, which is an online digital resource, which can be used with No Nonsense Phonics and the Phonics International programme. That's just to get the resources to you. And then actually everyone involved in a team, we're talking about people who work with schools like Carl, we're talking about the teachers and teaching assistants and head teachers, staff in the schools, the children themselves, aspiring to work in partnership with parents and carers. So what I'm really trying to say is, though we're talking about, my designs and the collaborative work with Carl, I wanted to start off with that acknowledgement that it really is a huge teamwork effort, and this is also very hard work for all of us. Okay, let's start the story of No Nonsense Phonics. It starts with a series published by Raintree called No Nonsense Phonics Skills. And I developed this sort of pick up and go hard copy books from the mother program, Phonics International Limited. So Phonics International Limited is a very extensive and comprehensive program that's delivered online with age ranges that it caters for from age 4+ right throughout primary and even into secondary when people need it. But Raintree worked closely with us to create this wonderful series and placed it at first for intervention, because most schools said they already had a phonics program, but they always had a big group of children who didn't seem to be learning. And so basically schools found that when they used this series of books, it engaged the children and taught them where they weren't able to teach them before. And although we say that in life there's no magic bullets, actually this is quite magic, because it is designed to be fit for purpose for children getting plenty of practice, which we're going to talk a lot about. So let's start off with this series of 9 pupil books. I'm going to talk about the rationale and the special features and the additional resources. So in a sense, the additional resources that you can get to support in schools turns No Nonsense Phonics Skills as a series into the program No Nonsense Phonics. We're going to include a few testimonials, including Carl's himself, refer to training opportunities, and make you aware that you can use Phonics internationally in a complementary way or an extension way throughout primary. And you might consider looking at Wand Phonics, which is designed by me to be able to be used in a complementary or supplementary way as an online digital interactive platform. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Know that all of this is underpinned by research findings for many decades. I can confidently call that settled science. So people who follow the research might know references to the 5 pillars of literacy, which really came from America, and the simple view of reading model, which is not a new model, but it was adopted in England's context in 2006, thanks to the Rose Report. If you're into research and finding out what's going on around the world, do have a look at the site of the International Foundation for Effective Reading Instruction, where there's a wealth of information. Now, in all of my phonics programs, I refer to the underpinning rationale as two-pronged, systematic and incidental phonics teaching and learning. And really, this is above and beyond just a systematic approach, because it's training and supporting teachers to refer and teach to any phonics, not just in the phonics lessons, but in the wider curriculum and for wider reading and writing. So I think that's a really important part of the rationale of my work. So as I said before, the main teaching and learning content is provided by the No Nonsense Phonics Skills series, which is published by Raintree. Few little references here, and it's about activity books or workbooks and paper-based work, because we do have a real mindset or a prejudice that children don't enjoy workbooks or activity books because, you know, they're a drudge or not fit for purpose. And we are going to say the opposite. So I'm going to hand over to Carl, because I think he's going to be able to describe to you what he has found in all of the schools where he visits.
Yeah, I could agree there. You know, sometimes there's that hesitation to sort of launch in and have you know, paper-based materials in front of children, but actually, you know, that point about it can be sort of dry or you know, or dull, whatever. Well, a piece of paper is the teaching brings it to life, and by having the booklet and the content in front of teachers, they can then think about how they're going to bring this to life. More importantly, meet the needs of their children. And I guess you know, the quote that's up on screen there, when it talks about you know, looking forward to phonics and you know, having confidence going through the roof. Well, having their own materials in front of them certainly supports that. It breeds that familiarity. But I know what I've seen in the numerous schools that I support is that children love having their own booklet in front of them, particularly when they look that good, you know, in terms of the colour and the quality of them. So yeah, a few points there really. So yeah, I certainly support that.
Yes, and the way I put it across to teachers is this: you know, if you want children to engage and love and become good at football, you take them out onto the field and you do skills and practice and games. And, you know, that's fit for purpose. So when we are teaching children foundational literacy for reading, for spelling, for writing, there is no more fit for purpose resource than paper-based content that you can provide the teacher to give to the children and to get all of the practice. So there's lots of reasons why paper-based content is so important and why children love it. I also want to talk about what phonics provision often looks like. It's very sedentary for the children. The teacher is often doing it to the children. So the teacher's doing revisit and review from the front. The teacher is introducing a new bit of code from the front. Children often sit on the carpet and they might do things with mini whiteboards. And they're engaged and they're enjoying it. And I'm not saying they don't learn anything, but that is simply not sufficient practice. You can't get the maths of the phonics. You can't easily get the revision and the repetition. And the engagement isn't as great as when children have their own work to work with. Right.
Can I support that as well, Debbie? I think one of the things about having you know, the content like we see on the screen there is that there's no place to hide. Children obviously love this material and engage in it. And by engaging it, they get to show you what they can and can't do. And sometimes that's a little bit harder to do, isn't it? When you're at the front of the class with your flashcards, you know, sometimes you never truly know how well this is doing, how much practice they're getting. With your booklet-based approach, you really do get to see that in evidence.
Absolutely. So what I've done is I've designed material that trains and teaches and learns with and informs people, and you're doing constant formative assessment as well. And it's so tangible. So I've got lots of corny phrases that I use, like fit for purpose and content rich. And one of my favorite words is tangible. What children are learning is absolutely tangible to everybody. Everybody can see it and repeat it easily. And if you start doing things like the maths of the phonics to see how much practice the children get, and the children are getting a huge amount of practice every single phonics session. And so really, this is why it's so effective, because it's not superficial. It's not something that you're just doing for a few minutes with flashcards or mini whiteboards and then it's all gone. And we'll develop this theme as we go along. So what you can see on this slide here are some samples or examples from the very first book, which is in the middle, where even when children only know 6-letter sound correspondences, they're doing little simple sentences. And we're looking at book 4, where you've got WH as code for wheel. And you've got book 7, where you're going on to there. What you can see there is teaching the notion of soft G. So there's a little reflection of the progression as you go along. And always we have these cumulative texts for children to apply and extend the phonics knowledge and skills. Right, so let's have a look then. That if you invest in the No Nonsense Phonics Skills Starter Kit, which is a really good, simple thing to do at first, what do you get in that kit? You get 6 of the same copies of the 9 pupil books. So you can start trialing it straight away. You get 9 teacher books containing additional guidance and example comprehension questions for the mini stories. So each pupil book has a parallel teacher book, because you might cut into the program, not from the beginning, but from book 3 for your children or book 5. There are 6 copies of examples of the laminated A4 tabletop alphabetic code chart. And then you get this USB stick, which is providing additional printable and projectable resources. In effect, that USB stick content is free. So let's have a look, because the stick itself is not tangible. You don't know what you're getting on there, and you're getting a massive amount on that USB stick. So have a thorough look at it. You get a couple of correlation charts for those people who feel the need. You get some video footage where I'm speaking with a lady called Angela Bolam about the rationale, and there's some classroom practice after about 5 minutes, showing a year 1 class halfway through, complete ability range across the class and what that looks like. Please notice that the children are sitting at desks. There's no need to do carpet work at all. And then you get assessment material ranging from the starting point of the simple view of reading diagram, right through to, say, the sounds posters, which are cumulative, to end of the pupil books summary assessment, not just with lowercase, but with capital letters as well, because capital letters are the same code as lowercase. You get a resource that I've actually named Frieze cards, because you can print these as Frieze if you want, and you can turn them into flashcards if you want. But one of the beauties is you can project them onto a screen and use them for some quick fire revisit and review and teacher-led introduction if you want. You have flexible choices as to what you use. Then you get a whole additional poster range, 49 word posters with all sorts of useful words, bits of extra code and so on, which you might decide to print off and make into some form of browse book, or just introduce to the children as and when it's appropriate. You get a printable double-sided alphabet letters formation poster and a giant one as well. And you get a printable giant alphabetic code chart, which you would have as the ever-present chart in your classroom. So that's an extraordinary range of material, which you will get with your starter kit. I'm going to ask Carl to talk to you about these special books here.
Yeah, so one thing that was very important to our trust schools was that they could continue to use their stock of decodable reading books, and like many schools, they'd invested heavily in a stock of reading books, and wanted to still be able to retain those because they were going well. But what you'll find with No Nonsense is that sequence of GPCs, those grapheme phoneme correspondences, are different to maybe like a traditional letters and sound sequence. So what we did as a trust is look at some of where those differences are. One of the first ones is around the old traditional letters and sounds phase 3. So the consonant digraphs that are within the phase 3 decodable books, that's taught a little bit later in this series because they get in lots of other stuff before that. So we looked at some of those, and Debbie explored that with me, and then agreed to write a 2+. So the 2+ obviously comes after book 2, and it brings those GPCs that you can see on there. So particularly those consonant digraphs. So that enables the school, once they've got through 2+, to be able to allocate more of the phase 3 books, and therefore we can start to match up our decodable reading stock to No Nonsense Phonics skills. Now the 5+, it's the same sort of concept really, but this is the idea of split vowel digraphs. So particularly they come later in the series in No Nonsense. However, through the 5+, those and lots of other particularly vowel digraphs are brought forward so that they can be addressed sooner. Therefore, we can allocate more of the traditional letters and sounds phase 5 books. But what we need to think around here is that if we were to just teach that a little bit sooner, we would then have the problem of other bits of code or other GPCs being out of sync. Maybe we haven't taught that. These two booklets are bringing the code earlier, and more importantly, only have code in them up to that point, which is exactly what schools need. So by having a 2+ and a 5+, we're getting the very best content that fits in line with what those children are so used to in terms of the lessons and the mini stories. And more importantly, by doing them, we're opening up our ability to allocate more of our stock if we have a letters and sounds collection of books. And that's worked really well in our schools. We have a matching document, so our schools know that once a No Nonsense Phonics Skills booklet is complete, they know that the stock that is available to them to allocate and match those decodables really well to children, whilst having all that wonderful content in the booklets that is also decodable text. And the last point here is that, you know, sometimes there's a bit of a fear factor that, wait a minute, we've got to have everything perfectly matched. Well, I'm telling you that you can perfectly match books well to children, as well as Debbie's books, which she will share. We can match these to a letters and sounds based stock of decodable reading books. And more importantly, 2 of our schools have recently been through an Ofsted and come out really, really strongly. They were doing this. So I hope that gives you some confidence.
And I have to explain why I'm sort of grinning from ear to ear here, because when Carl was explaining to me about, oh, Debbie, can you do these extra books? This will work really well. I'm sort of groaned. These books are really hard work to put together. But actually, I'm the first person to say, do not discard reading scheme books that you have already. And I promote the use of schools having a variety of these books and also knowing their children well enough, because some children can self-teach and race ahead anyway. And so listen very carefully. We have matched plain texts throughout the No Nonsense Phonics Skills series. So for every single grapheme you're introducing in a systematic way, you've already got a matched text. And it could well be that actually for home reading, some of your children at least will need books that are easier than that at the end of the day when, you know, they're tired and parents and carers are tired. And then some children will race ahead. So it's not that you jump the code in the program, because you still need that for spelling and handwriting, for all the vocabulary enrichment. So you need to know your children. And so there are quite a few leading phonics program authors who aren't saying have only one set of matched text. They are saying, actually, no, have the variety, know your program, know your children, and do that accordingly. But also my company, Phonics International Limited, we've got an ethos, which is really to provide a lot of things which are free and printable or projectable, and also not to spend and overly charge people for what we provide. So you will always find that our materials are extremely well priced or free. Right, cracking on then. Let's have a quick look at some of these additional ready-made resources. I will reiterate that No Nonsense Phonics Skills in that starter kit doesn't need these. These are things you can buy ready-made to save you printing them, which has got a cost in and of itself. So we have things like very sturdy giant alphabetic code charts, pull up or hang down. We've got sets of Frieze Sheets, sounds mats, flashcards, tables. Well, I won't read all of these because I'm going to show you. Although I will just mention the 2 Phonics and Talk Time books, which are superb, and they are for nursery age. So you can start with our work and rationale there. So to complement No Nonsense Phonics Skills, you've got the Phonics International program itself, which is online and free, and the One Phonics Digital Interactive resource, which is only £99 plus VAT per year. One Phonics, let's have a quick reference to this. I'm going to hand over to Carl as well, because he's got an objective view of whether this is a useful resource to have as a complementary resource.
I think with One Phonics, obviously it's supplementary and is a separate cost, is really, really low cost. what this can bring to you is additional options. So because it's sort of an IT-based program, we get a little bit more flexibility, in my opinion. So for practical reasons, let's say that we have a supply teacher or a teacher that isn't as confident at introducing sounds and code and letter sound correspondences and those sorts of things. This as a resource can help support that and do it very well because of the audio bit sitting behind it. But also we often get where children are at different levels and, you know, maybe due to absence or whatever, they can come back and access this material, you know, however you see fit, really. And I think the other bit is that once we have an IT-based program like this, we can get it into the home quite easily. And I know Debbie's very passionate about that, having that two-way communication channel between home and school. Well, a resource like this on a device in the home is going to do that, and more importantly, it's going to take that pressure off the parent because he's going to provide you know, the required audio and the examples and that interactivity that children love. So for a very low cost, you have got a really useful resource that can certainly supplement No Nonsense. And again, let's go back to that teacherness. Use your thoughts and your own context. How can we get the most out of this to add to what we already do? That's probably some of my thoughts.
I think it's got so many incredible purposes. So, for example, sometimes a teacher teaching English has not got English as the main language or the mother tongue. And we might be sent, frequently there are people at home where English is an additional language or even a new language. So by giving the audio and all of the things, the phonics skills and core skills, blending and segmenting there, it's incredibly supportive. So again, it trains, it informs and supports and gives that flexibility. So with No Nonsense Phonics Skills and Phonics International, the paper-based content can go backwards and forwards to home as a routine, but also this can put everything in the home. So it teaches, it assesses. Generally speaking, there are 13 routine activities, all core, nothing extraneous or pink and fluffy. And it's actually training and teaching and supporting everything. And 9 of the little activities are assessed as you go along, so children get a sense of rewards and so on. Right, cracking on then. Right, the full range of these resources you can find at the site phonixintervention.org. More recently, we created a holding page, nononsensephonics.com, for people who remember the name No Nonsense Phonics, which will lead you to our main site and the shop where we sell all of these things. Right, so what we're doing then, we're distinguishing between the alphabet and the alphabetic code chart, teaching these notions. We've got the ready-made Frieze, printable guidance, little tips. For example, I'm recommending 2 sets of the Frieze, one that can be permanently up in a classroom at a high level because it's very clear Frieze and you don't have to take it up and down. And then for your focus display, you can just have your parallel set and introduce it as you go along systematically. Same with flashcards. The teacher has his or her own set, and as you introduce the bits of code systematically, you take a parallel set and add it to the children's play and continuous provision so that they themselves can start to play with it. And everything I do is value added. So on the flashcards, you have got the focus grapheme, the key picture word, the position of the focus bit of code in a printed word. You have got printed words to practice reading. So you need print to sound for that. You've got letter formation, and you get 2 tiny little words for the teacher to say as spoken words to model spelling. So I want you to be to sort of understand the level of design that goes into these. They're not just any old flashcards or any old Frieze. There's always plenty of thinking there. As we progress in the program, the Frieze includes some additional words which are in the mini stories or which are just simply useful to have. And then here, I'm going to blame Carl for these as well, because he pressed to have this in our range. So Carl, over to you again.
We have to, again, a flexible resource. We often want something to pick up and go, maybe with a small group of children or to do some one-to-one. So I suggested having a smaller set of the flashcards, and these are really high quality. They feel like playing cards, so they're excellent to work and use with children. But what they give is that we've got just the piece of code on one side, and then if we turn over, we've got the code, mnemonic and then the piece of code within a word. So again, multiple options there. But the schools that I support and work with predominantly use these with children one-to-one or at other opportunities throughout the day. And they're so small, they're sort of sat in the pocket and ready to go. So yeah, multiple purposes, and yeah, I think they're a high quality resource that offer that flexibility, which is excellent.
Yes, and I would say these are not actually core provision or a core resource. It's one of those sort of supplementary resources which can do little and often. You can make words and break words, and you can spell using cards without handwriting. And actually, if you've got intervention, there is even a case for supplying these in the homes of children who are showing more of a struggle to learn to read. But then that leads to the sounds mats. Because you could say, well, isn't that doing the same thing? And the answer is yes and no. So again, there's lots of design on here. So some sounds mats don't put the printed word, don't show the code in the printed word, and don't tell you what the key word is or the key picture is. So on one side, you've got teaching going on, and you can look at it as in yawn, A as in first aid, and so on. And on the other side, you've got assessment, where you've got no picture clues or words. And so you can do quick fire assessment. And if children get stuck on a piece of code, you can flick the card over, and then the child can search for it and have a little reminder. So it's a really good teaching and learning tool. Now, we give these also as free printables on our free resources site page. And so you can provide them in the home, whether you provide them as ready-made hard copy stuff or as printables. So that leads to saturation, that when you are saturating the tangible visual resources for the children, you raise the likelihood of actual learning taking place. Then I'm going to talk about these phonics reading books. Again, these are an addition because we always provided the plain matched texts. And with these books, on the back of the book, you can see that we have the same color coding and color chunking as we do for all of the other resources, and a clear indication of the code that's within each book. And they're very ambitious books. And it may well be that you want to just keep these as sort of in the school for structured support. And what we do is include longer words from the outset and some really ambitious vocabulary. And so I was asking for feedback from one particular school, and this young chap who loved these books was pointing out the vocabulary. So this is unprompted feedback. And he said, you sometimes learn new words like spick and span and ecstatic. I learn the meanings of new words because they're at the back of the book. My teacher helps me learn the meaning by talking about them when we read together. I have learned the meaning of assist, insist, ecstatic, antiseptic, hesitant, fab. Now, those words are from early books. So imagine how that series progresses. And again, we actually provide some printable instructions, and you can get those books in packs of 5, whether they're mixed or the same content. Right, we're going to tell you a little bit more now about the actual design and content of the Pupil books. As you can see, these are stunning books. They don't feel like all just white and monochrome. In the front of every single book, we have chunked the alphabetic code. And again, this is information for the teacher, but don't forget, these also go backwards and forwards to home. So we're informing home as well. And this is training people, supporting and training people, which could be your student teacher, supply teacher, visiting parent or whatever. And then in the teacher books, and all the teacher books are the same format, you have a little bit of blurb at the beginning, which is making reference to the research base and the simple view of reading diagram. The importance of distinguishing between the alphabet and the alphabetic code and what each brings to the table and where there is overlap. My very important rationale, which is 2-pronged systematic and incidental phonics teaching and learning, and how easy that can look. So the little diagram there is sort of saying you can teach split digraphs and these bits of code when you need to, as they arise in the wider curriculum or in children's names. So although on Carl's request, we introduced split digraphs earlier in 5+, you may well have already started to make reference to words with split digraphs, which are so common. And so really, the incidental phonics bit is massive overlearning and enabling children to self-teach. And then we've got the teaching and learning cycle, which you will recognize as the sort of routines we put into our phonics provision. You've got guidance for the phonics routines, and then comprehension questions. So what I'm going to do now is to attempt to go into an e-book example, which is looking like it's working. So I can breathe a sigh of relief. So what we have here now, and we've got the same ebook on our phonicsintervention.org site to show you how lovely they are, how easy they are to use. So you'll recognize the front cover is the same as the Pupil book. Beginning blurb, you'll see the teaching and learning cycle, guidance for the phonics routines, and how to engage and mark and assess. Because actually part of the engagement of children is you will train them with a sharp pointed ordinary pencil to tick what they think they know and circle what they think they don't know. So right from the beginning, they are working in an ethos of it's all right not to know something, which isn't like a mini whiteboard, oh, quick, wipe it off so nobody sees it. It's the opposite to that. It's okay to make mistakes, not to know, and it's the teacher's job to actually teach you and help you and give you more practice with that. So there's a huge ethos underpinning all of my work. And also what I find in schools is teachers do all sorts of hand routines for reading and for spelling and muddle up the teaching of reading and spelling. So in my training and guidance, it's very clear what you are teaching, whether you are teaching print to sound reading or sound to print spelling or the sub-skills of those routines. The suggested questions always go from literal, inference and discussion because we're developing language comprehension. And then at the beginning of each pupil book, because you are seeing the pupil book in the teacher book, this is what the pupil book looks like. And you need to read through all this teacher book before you start that pupil book. Now, some of the little post-it notes guidance are just guidance and pointers and things that you might have done naturally, and other things are actual training. You cannot assume that, for example, a teaching assistant new to your school understands that systematic synthetic phonics is at the smallest units of sound. So it's not teaching st, it's teaching st, for example. So throughout the teacher book, you get these little bits of extra guidance on how to use the book. And this can't be simpler. So be attached to your teacher book, look at all these bits of guidance, and also what you can see now is what the pupil book looks like. So the activities on the left are the multi-skills activities, which is code and word level. And down at the bottom here where it says encoding, use some of these words for the spelling routine. You need for that a little ordinary exercise book with ordinary narrow writing lines because you have overspill work to do with these pupil books as well. So at this early stage, you have lines under to give the children space to write in the book. But when the texts get more dense, you need to start to do copywriting or self-dictation in actual exercise books, along with those spelling routines. And use the exercise books to put in any letter formation that the children don't consistently get wrong and so on. So if I just flick through this quickly now, you can see the pattern. And then at the end of each pupil book, you'll have different types of end pages, which could be based on assessment, like letter formation, doing some summary spelling, and spelling word bank work. Now, spelling word bank work is something that's often neglected or misunderstood in schools or phonics programs. There is no way of getting away from it. Children need to know which words are spelt which way. So right from book one, we drop in the notion of spelling alternatives and the need to pay attention to how words are spelled. We have a book assessment at the end, the words for the front picture, but also here, revisit the alphabetic code on this page constantly, even when you've completed the book and progressed to the next book. That's about looking back to old learning for revisit and review, which is over and above just sit on the carpet and get a flashcard routine. Right, so I'm pleased that went quite well. moving on then. Now, in my work, we introduce the letter sign correspondences much steadier than many other phonics programs. It's not one piece of code a day. It might be one every other day or 2 a week, which is plenty because you're getting deep practice at code and word and text, code, word and text level as well. So in the teacher books, you'll notice the session 1 and session 2, and that might be over 2 days, or when children get more efficient and older, you might start session 2 for some of them or all of them on that first day, but you've got that 2-day teaching and learning cycle. And it says exactly what session 1 looks like, who introduces and does what or uses what visual display you have to set it up, and so on. And I'm going to hand over to Carl now because he's got some observations that he's made about this teaching and learning cycle.
I mean, the first point is to join those 2 last bits together. Is having this in the teaching book has been crucial for some of our teachers, because this approach is very different to what they've been used to. And in the early days of implementing the new program, it doesn't, it isn't all coming natural to you. It's not all straight in your head. So having it written down in your teacher book to refer back to remind yourself of what's coming next is, is really, really useful. It sounds very simple, but it's been crucial to lots of our teachers, because what our teachers are keen to do is get this right. And what they realize is, oh, I forgot to do this. And then they make a particular note around, on their teacher and learning cycle that, right, it's this bit that we've got to get better at. Exactly. We want to make that happen for our children. So a nice example of that is if we see session 1 talks about starting with the Frieze cards, but as we move around to the second box, individual pupil revision, this, in my opinion, is a real strength of the No Nonsense Phonics approach. This idea that, wait a minute, it's not all about the teacher at the front, it's about me as a child engaging with the material in front of me, doing my own revisit. And that, to me, is pretty unique, really. So the idea that every day I know, in terms of my routines, I'm coming to the start of my book and I'm doing my say the sounds, and my teachers moving around might be listening to me or supporting me or just making some notes about how that's going. I actually then practice a lot of code. I'm then given some instructions to say, right, I need you to turn to this page. And so because I've got the booklet in front of me, I go back to something I used to do as, a week ago, a day ago, whatever, but my teacher said, let's go back to that learning. And so that individual pupil revision is a particular area I've been working on with teachers. Let's make the most of that. So yes, this teaching and learning cycle is different. So having it to hand is wonderful. And because it's in all the teacher books, that makes that really, really easy. It helps them focus in as practitioners on what is the bit that I need to get better at. But more important, I love that this makes it really clear that it's about the pupil revisiting prior learning, and that can is huge for children. I see some, I've lost count of the number of examples where I see children that had previously circled a piece of learning that are now able to tick it, and that the smile that they get on their face from doing that they can't wait to show me or whoever the practitioner is on there. The idea that actually they become more efficient. So maybe their sounding out was very slow, but now they've gone back to it and it's increased. Their automaticity is increased, so on and so on. The handwriting, I can go back, I can write that neater than I used to, and all of that. So yeah, so I guess there's a few points there, really, but a real strength of the program from what I've seen in the schools that are implementing this so far.
Thank you very much for that. And really that goes down to such notion of saturation, that they're tangibly seeing and doing these activities, and the maths of the phonics. It's also about differentiation, because children work at their own speed and their own capacity. So even when children are on the same pages or the same content in terms of the code or the book, they're still working, being able to apply themselves at their own speed and level. So it's tremendous. Now, literally, if you go and observe a class and see what children do in a typical phonics lesson, often it's not very much. Literally, per child, it's not much. And then if you compare it with the level of content and application in No Nonsense Phonics and indeed Phonics International, it's massive. And if you take that across day after day after day after day, cumulatively, that makes a huge difference. And also with this teaching learning cycle, if you run out of time at any point in one of your sessions, the rule of thumb is very simple. Take up the next session from where you left off. So you're not always trying to start every single session from introducing a new piece of code. You just follow that teaching learning cycle at a nice steady pace. That's the sort of tortoise plodding, strong approach to the program. And then the hair bit, the incidental bit, is you're sort of teaching bits and pieces of the code as you go along. So very, very different from a lot of other people's phonics programs and approach. Right. Let's get down to cost then. So at the point that we are recording this, these are the prices. So Raintree can supply that full kit and packs of Pupil Books, and you can see the prices there at this point. The recorded video may last longer, so it might go above those prices eventually. And then Phonics International Limited provide and sell all of these ready-made resources at our phonicsintervention.org site. And there is a cost to printing material anyway, but these are a good quality, very, very clear, and extremely well priced. And actually, Carl said something to me about our pricing, didn't you, Carl?
Yeah, I guess, various programs that are doing it different ways, and people will be exploring that. But I think what our schools really appreciate is that when they see something like the A4 Frieze Sheets, that's for the whole set of code, not for a particular book or a particular area. It's from start to finish. So actually, as a resource, that's really, really useful in itself to have these full sets of code and maybe divvy it up. But when we're thinking about the cost, when I think I get the whole set of GPCs for a full program, that might not necessarily be what happens in other programs. So yeah, certainly worth exploring a little bit further.
And I think it's worth saying that actually the sheer amount of code that's covered in No Nonsense Phonics Skills is extensive, comprehensive, and much more than a lot of other phonics programs. So people really need to look into that. And so what's on the back of the book showing the code, more than that even, is introduced within the mini stories. And then Phonics International goes even further still. So if you continue to use that with sort of juniors or key stage 2 children, you will find that children are really good readers anyway, but you're actually using it as a spelling program moving onwards. So it's when you're doing your evaluation of what to use, it's understanding all of these nuances. So what I'm going to do now is stop that share and say to you, thank you very much for your patience and interest, everybody, if you've managed to reach the end of our webinar. I cannot thank Carl enough. He's part of that team and he's such a pleasure to work with collaboratively. And, he goes into schools and with objectivity. So working across different schools, different size schools that have used different programs, and he sees different programs. And I feel extremely honoured and humbled that he approached me to work with me, and that speaks for itself. Carl?
Thank you, Debbie. No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on this. It's been a really exciting journey in terms of supporting schools in our trust with this and to see the impact. And myself as a practitioner, my own thinking around pedagogy and what phonics should be has certainly been challenged and has grown for the better. So yeah, thank you too. And I guess schools, where next? Where do they go now if this is something that they want to explore? I know what our schools did. Well, I will certainly get in touch with Debbie directly via our website. And if you do want to reach out to the Fine High Trust, we're obviously easy to find on the internet. Please do connect with us and get in touch if you'd like to know more about what our schools are doing with No Nonsense. I'd happily share that with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye.